Second Chances. Chapter 8.
Naval Base 13 seemed to float just beyond the Enterprise's forward hull. David knew it was an optical illusion. This was the point where he would meet his crew and begin the exercise of retrofitting an old heavy cruiser. In its day, she was a battle wagon to be reckoned with, the USS Constitution. He felt the excitement of the moment catch him, and he reveled in it. Captain Perry, Commander Walker, and the rest of the senior officers of the Enterprise had come to the teleporter room to see him off. Each one wished him the best of luck and reiterated their friendship. Just as David stepped to the teleporter pad, Lieutenant Champion bustled into the room out of breath as if he had been running. In his arms was a large container with a note on it saying it was a gift to the USS Constitution from the USS Enterprise. Reg set the container on the teleporter pad and stepped over to wish David the best of luck. David looked at Reg and asked, "What is this, Reg?"
You'll see, Captain. I thought you might just need what I have in here. Well, I hope to see you again.
Captain Perry raised his hand and said,
"Calm seas and fair winds."
David stepped onto the teleporter pad and bid his friends goodbye. As the teleporter began to hum, David felt the usual sense of disorientation. As a new room began to form before his eyes, he saw the operator and a man in the uniform of a Commodore. David stepped off the teleporter platform as the Commodore stepped forward, hand extended.
Captain Stevens, Commodore Clausen. All the people assigned to your crew are here already. I have notified them to meet us in the shuttle bay in 30 minutes.
Thank you, Commodore. Why the shuttle bay, sir?
Save your thanks, Captain. You have been given 419 of the fleet's worst men and women. It's all I have been able to do to keep them from being thrown in the brig. The shuttle bay is the only place large enough for all 420 people to gather.
Commodore, I have been assigned to retrofit the Constitution. Can you tell me where she is?
After you have met with your crew, I'll take you there.
The two men walked briskly to the Commodore's office. In the office sat two men, one an elderly System Navy captain and the other David recognized as Admiral Timothy Holoran. Admiral Holoran stood and introduced the captain sitting with him.
Captain Stevens, this is Captain Robert O'Reilly, your new chief engineer. O'Reilly, this is Captain David Stevens. Dave is one of the 500-year-old men I've told you about.
O'Reilly and David shook hands. I'm pleased to meet you, Captain O'Reilly.
Please, Captain, call me O'Reilly, most everyone does.
Then, O'Reilly, call me Dave. Most people don't. Admiral Holoran spoke.
Dave, O'Reilly was my chief engineer on the old Enterprise. He knows more about that class of ship than anybody else in or out of the fleet. So when he heard that we would retrofit the Constitution, he came begging for a billet aboard her.
Aye, that's the truth, and I love the old ship.
The Commodore spoke up.
It's time to meet your crew. If you and Captain O'Reilly will come with me, we will get started.
The four men walked into the shuttle bay. Came a shout from about four voices. Admiral Holoran shouted.
As you were.
Commodore Clausen said.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Stevens, your new commander.
David stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Admiral Timothy Holoran and Captain Robert O'Reilly. Captain O'Reilly is our chief engineer. Admiral Holoran.
You are going to retrofit the USS Constitution. We believe this is one way to rebuild the fleet quickly after the war with the Zenites and the devastating losses at Hell System 3. You have 18 months to get the ship battle ready. Your commissioning ceremony is already on Admiral Merivotch's calendar. I will be keeping tabs on your progress. Captain Stevens, they're all yours. I wish you all the best of luck.
After this meeting, I want to speak with all the lieutenant commanders and commanders. We will gather here again at 0800 hours tomorrow morning. Dismissed. The crew stood and filed out of the bay, leaving just the lieutenant commanders and commanders. David and O'Reilly sat, and David said, I'm David Stevens. I have just been promoted to captain, which is my first command. Now, I would like you to introduce yourselves.
I am Commander John Self. I once commanded the USS Bismarck. I was given a court-martial for insubordination.
I am Lieutenant Commander Tivas. I was once a Commodore, fleet surgeon. I was given a court-martial for failure to obey the orders of a superior officer and insubordination.
I'm Commander Beverly Slater. I once commanded the USS Valiant. I was given a court-martial for insubordination and conduct unbecoming an officer.
I'm Commander Cyril. I was once the commander of Naval Base 52. I was given a court-martial for failure to obey the orders of a superior officer.
David looked at each officer in turn, and then after hearing them, he said, I see that each of you has more experience than I do. And most likely, from what Commodore Clausen has said, most of the crew has more experience than I do. I have been a military man for 35 years. But I will still need your help and support if we are going to meet the deadline given to us by Admiral Holoran. Can I count on you? John spoke up.
Sir, we are all combat veterans. I believe each of us became a victim of a peacetime fleet. I can't speak for anyone but me, but you can count on me.
The other officers spoke up, proclaiming their loyalty to the system. David stood up. Great. Ladies and gentlemen, Commodore Clausen will take me to the Constitution right after we leave here. Do you know who is the senior commander among you?
Yes, sir. Commander Self is the senior commander.
Thank you. I want Commanders Slater and Sorrell to begin reviewing the personnel records of our crew and draw up an assignment roster to meet the Table of Distribution and Authorization, TDA, for the Constitution. Commander Self, you will be first officer. I would like you to accompany me to the Constitution today. Doctor, please work with Commanders Slater and Sorrell to assign medical and life science personnel.
Yes, sir.
Well, O'Reilly, Commander Self, shall we find the Commodore? The 6 officers filed out of the shuttle bay. David asked, Oh, Commander Sorrell, Commander Slater, which of you is senior? Commander Sorrell said.
Commander Slater is senior.
Commander Slater, that makes you second officer. While Captain O'Reilly, Commander Self, and I are away, you have the con.
Aye, sir.
The junior officers walked toward the Naval Base Personnel section while the 3 senior officers set out to find the Commodore. In personnel, Commander Slater approached the Chief Petty Officer in charge and asked for the records of the personnel assigned to the Constitution.
Commander, I know that the computer systems on your ship have been removed, so we have downloaded everyone's record to palm pads. I know it is a little ungainly, but it is the best we can do now.
Slater replied.
I see. Well, lead us to them, Chief.
The chief took the 3 officers to a back room stacked high with record pads.
These are their records, sir. You will find that they have been sorted alphabetically by rank. The senior officers on this table, near the door, the junior officers on that table in the middle, and the crewmen on the table by the bulkhead.
Thank you, Chief. We appreciate your help.
Thank you, sir. If there is anything you need, just let me know. We close up shop at 1700 hours. So, we will be around for a few more hours. You may work in here as long as you need to.
Again, thanks.
The chief left the 3 officers to their task. Commander Slater suggested that they begin with the senior officers and work from there. They started to read the individuals' records noting areas of strength, and began making tentative assignments. David, O'Reilly, and Commander Self found the Commodore, who took them to his shuttle and into space. About 10 miles from the naval base floated ships of every description and in every conceivable state of unserviceability. Clausen pointed out many different ships. Clustered together were 9 old heavy cruisers. They could see such names as Constellation, Excalibur, Exeter, Hood, Defiant, Potemkin, and Enterprise, valiant old ships with records that made up much of the history of the system navy. The Commodore pointed to one cluster of mutilated debris, some of which were barely recognizable as having once been part of a heavy cruiser.
Over there is what is left of the fleet that met the androids of Beta 3 at Hell System 3.
He, again, pointed out another area filled with more debris and wrecked ships.
That is what is left of many ships that engaged the Zeniths.
Scattered around were parts of shuttles, pods, and more general debris. Commodore Clausen took them into the center of the flotilla of old wrecks, and on the hull of one ship, they could make out USS Constitution. Clausen guided his shuttle around the old vessel and brought it into the ship's shuttle bay. Then, thumbing a switch, the bay doors closed, and the bay began to fill with air. The Commodore said,
When we heard that this ship was to be retrofitted, we brought out a portable power source and ensured that she would hold an atmosphere. We have also installed a small computer system to control life support and the teleporter. As far as being airtight, she is sound. You and your crew will be able to make your quarters here. I brought you out here by shuttle so that you could see her outer hull and the other ships of this class.
David thanked the Commodore and started to walk away when the Commodore spoke.
You are authorized to use parts of any salvage here except the old heavy cruisers. In time, they may all be recommissioned.
We understand, sir.
Good. I'll take the shuttle back. You can use the teleporter. It's only a few miles to the base. Well, I'll leave you to it, captains, commander. Best of luck.
David turned to his first officer. Well, John, let's see what the crew quarters are like. Then, Captain O'Reilly, I suppose you will want to inspect engineering.
Aye, that I will.
Okay, O'Reilly, we'll meet you in the teleporter room in about 2 hours. David and John began to inspect the quarters. They found they were clean and neat, a credit to the ship's last crew. They carefully checked as many cabins as they could in the 2 hours they had given themselves. The quarters were, by modern standards, small but more than adequate. Each cabin had a desk, chair, bed, wardrobe, lounge chair, and a chest of drawers. In addition, some cabinets could be used for any purpose the occupant might wish. These furnishings were in excellent repair. After 2 hours, the three officers met in the teleporter room. O'Reilly, what do you think? David asked.
The last crew left her in good shape. But we'll have to work on the matter-antimatter reactor first thing. We will also have to find a source of dilithium crystals until we can adapt the new trilithium technology. The portable power source the Commodore had installed will do nicely until we can get the ship's reactor up and running.
John said.
There are a few things we will need immediately. But, first, we will need large and small replicators.
O'Reilly added.
Aye, and we are going to need computers. I stopped by the computer bays, they have all been ripped out. And I mean ripped. It will take the most part of 6 months to install new computers completely.
Well, we can get the crew moved in tomorrow and start working the day after. However, if we didn't get a replicator, we would have to schedule the crew to teleport back to the base for meals. So I will move my gear here and move in this evening. O'Reilly said.
I believe I will, too.
And John thought he would also. O'Reilly set the teleporter coordinates and mounted the teleporter platform, and the three teleported back to the base. David and John set out to find the other senior officers and found them up to their necks in personnel records. Commander Slater reported their progress to David and John. John mentioned that the three of them were going to move to the Constitution that evening. The other three officers thought it would be best for them to do the same. So, they began to collect the record pads and other materials for transport to the ship. David found the Commodore and asked where his personal gear had been stowed. The Commodore told him, and David went and had it teleported to the ship. He carried his gear in the case Reg had given him to the captain's cabin and began to stow his gear. Then, overcome with curiosity, he began to open the gift the Enterprise had given to the Constitution. Opening the case, he found the working parts of a replicator and a set of instructions to connect the replicator to a teleporter pad. You can use the teleporter to bring in raw materials to be used in the replicator from the salvage there in the yard. There was also a note, Dave, I directed Reg to fabricate this replicator. We have included in this unit a miniaturized computer so that it will not need to be tied into the ship's main system. You will find that it is programmed to replicate all the various menu items from the computer of the Enterprise. We have included all the tools you might need and all the materials and components that were programmed into our replicators, even other replicators. You will find that using the teleporter platforms eliminates the size limitations of most replicators. My best wishes, George. David took the replicator back down to the teleporter room and connected the equipment according to Reg's instructions. A note from Reg assured him that this would only limit the teleporter by one pad. The rest could still be used as teleporter pads. To test the equipment, David commanded the unit to produce a small replicator for his quarters. And there materialized on the teleporter pad one replicator the size of the one he had in his cabin aboard the Enterprise. David took that unit back to his quarters, found a power outlet, and connected the equipment. Well, now comes the acid test. Coffee. Hot. Stevens blend. Black. There appeared in the replicator's hopper 1 cup of steaming black coffee. David tasted it and proclaimed, "Man, that's good." Then he asked for a hand laser, and one appeared. But the power indicator showed that it was drained. He took the laser to the armory and set it in a charger. The unit began to charge the laser with no problem. That's good to know. He checked the armory and found chargers for 50 hand lasers. I'll get a crewman to fill the table of distribution for this ship after they have moved in. Returning to the teleporter room, he found all 5 of his senior officers just stepping off the teleporter platform, gear in hand. He said, "Find your cabin. Then come back, I have something for you." Captain O'Reilly said,
"Sir, I asked the Commodore for some replicators. But he said our TDA does not authorize replicators on this ship."
"No problem, O'Reilly. First, I have the replicators. Second, I have authority from Admiral Merivotch to modify the ship and its TDA the way I think best."
"You have the replicators?"
All the officers asked. "Watch. Computer, 1 cabin-sized replicator." And 1 cabin-sized replicator appeared on the teleporter pad. A gift from the Enterprise to the Constitution. Just order 1 and take it to your quarters. It will be up to you to install it in your quarters. The same for each crewman. David reminded them to order a tag for their cabin door. Each officer took their gear and found their quarters. After stowing their gear, they returned to the teleporter room and ordered their replicator, taking the units back and installing them in their cabins. David asked the officers to join him in the rec room for the evening meal. David had installed a replicator in the rec room for the occasion. The 6 gathered in the rec room, ordered their choice of meals, seated themselves around the table, and began to dine. They talked about the ship, the crew, and the work needed to make the ship battle-ready. Beverly asked the captain for a place to complete their review of the crew's records and assignment roster. Captain Stevens suggested using the conference room. He asked about the assignments of the senior officers and lieutenants, and Beverly went and got a pad and handed it to David. He and John reviewed the assignments for division, section, and shift supervisors. They both approved the work so far and asked that the records for these officers be made available for their review in the morning in the captain's cabin. Then David asked O'Reilly about the availability of computers. O'Reilly said that he would requisition the needed computer systems in the morning. The 6 officers agreed to meet in the teleporter room at 07:30 to teleport to the base and get the crew moving to the ship. It took several hours to teleport the entire crew to the ship. By noon the crew had been teleported, assigned quarters, and instructed to install a replicator in their cabin. By 1300, the crew was quartered and instructed to replicate the items they needed in their quarters, such as sheets, pillows, and cases, any personal hygiene items they had forgotten, and any item they wished to make their cabins comfortable. Then David found Lieutenant Abels and asked her to check out the ship's communications systems. He wanted the ship's internal communications functional as soon as possible. As David had asked, she immediately began to work on the ship's communications. Tori restored the internal ship communications within just a few hours. At 16:15, she reported to her captain,
"Sir, I have the ship's internal communications fixed."
"Thank you, Tori. Ship-wide, please."
"Ship-wide, sir."
"Now hear this. This is the captain. At 0800 in the morning, all officers will assemble in the conference room. All other crewmen will prepare their quarters for inspection. That is all, Captain out." Captain O'Reilly had contacted the Naval Base Supply Officer and had begun the requisitioning process. He had requested the necessary computer hardware, firmware, and software. Still, he was informed that the TDA for the Constitution did not authorize the computer components and software that he had ordered. O'Reilly returned and ordered the systems and software that were called for by the TDA and was informed that this equipment was obsolete and unavailable. He told the captain,
"There's no working with these bin counters, Dave. I can't get a computer one. It's either obsolete and unavailable, or we are not authorized it."
David thought a moment and then suggested that they try the replicator in the teleporter room. They went to the teleporter room and asked for a computer console, specifying modern nomenclature, and they got it. David suggested that O'Reilly have his engineers replicate the necessary hardware and then download the software from the naval base mainframe. "When we are finished, our hardware will be identical to the system aboard Captain Perry's Enterprise." By 0800, Commanders Self, Slater, and Sorrell had completed the assignment roster and had brought all the personnel record pads to David's quarters. T. Vass had the medical and life science assignments and had contacted each one individually to inform them of their assignment and work schedule. At 0800 hours, the officers had assembled in the conference room. John ensured that each officer was informed of their assignment and provided each a list of crewmen assigned under their supervision. David addressed the officers. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been given a list of the personnel assigned to your division or section. Your first task is to inspect those individuals' quarters, looking for contraband, cleanliness, and order. Your second task is to ensure that everyone is informed of their assignment, supervisor, and when and where to report for duty. Finally, personnel will be assigned specific duties to facilitate the retrofit of our ship. Any questions?
Yes, sir. Lieutenant Kaita, Security Chief. Since we are here in this salvage yard at a naval base, there will be very little security duty for my people to perform. What do you want them to do?
Lieutenant, first priority is seeing that your section is combat ready. That will include the brig, armory, and the other things you are responsible for. I also expect this ship to look like it just came out of the shipyards. Captain O'Reilly may be requesting help from time to time. Ladies and gentlemen, to ensure we stay on target, I want each of you to draw up a list of things which must be done in your section to get this ship ready. Prioritize the list and make tentative assignments to get it done. We will meet here every morning at 0530 hours and every evening at 2100 hours until we have a good handle on where we are at and where we are going. Number 1. Number 2. We will get together after these meetings to discuss our strategies. David dismissed the officers and began to walk to his cabin. On his way, he encountered Lieutenant Tori Abels. How are things going in communications, Lieutenant Abels?
I've just started, sir. I figure it will take me about 3 months to go through all the communications equipment and wiring on the ship if I don't run into any big problems.
How many crewmen are assigned to communications?
There are 5 for each shift, sir, including me, 415.
Who've you got? Consulting the pad in her hand.
Lieutenant Tal Jensen will be my number 2. Then Lieutenant Cornall. Then Crewman Dewey, Ezel, Hammer, Jensen, Cavati, Bedig, Boatwright, Valdez, Zenner, Rosel, Powell, and Moto.
Well, get your lieutenants and inspect those cabins, then get on with the retrofit.
Aye, aye, sir.
David stepped into his cabin, sat at his desk, and picked up the first record pad, Commander John Self. As he went through the records, he found that every officer he had been assigned was a remarkable, efficient, loyal combat veteran. Each had been decorated for merit, distinguished service, and valor. It was difficult to believe that these officers were guilty of the misconduct for which they had been given a court-martial. He had in his crew officers who were once commodores and captains. He continued day after day to review the records of every man and woman in his crew. There was one thread that ran through these records. Effective, efficient, loyal, and courageous officers and crewmen were, it seemed to David, railroaded by a very few high-ranking officers. 2 names seemed to stand out, Admirals Holoran and Miguel Chavez. David could not help but wonder why. Meeting with Captain O'Reilly, David made 2 very special requests. First, he wanted to know if the engineering subsystems monitor console on the bridge could be miniaturized and integrated into the engineering station. O'Reilly felt that it could be done. But he wanted to know why. David told O'Reilly that he wanted to remodel that area into a small ready room just off the bridge like those on the newer ships. Second, David wanted the engineering division to have the existing shield generating equipment removed and the improved equipment installed. He showed the chief engineer the plans, schematics, specifications, and test results he and Reg Champion had developed. Mr. O'Reilly told him that it would be no problem because every element of the old system had to be removed, inspected, repaired, and reinstalled anyway. The only problem would be fabricating the new equipment. David busied himself with the details of the ship's retrofit. Every morning at 0530, the officers met in the conference room and laid out their plans for the day. Then, every evening at 2100 hours, the officers again met in the conference room to review what had been accomplished and what they knew still had to be done before the commissioning date. John Self oversaw the retrofit of the command sections of the bridge. Beverly Slater oversaw the overhaul of auxiliary control. Day after day, the crew worked to ready the old ship for battle. The work went on for 3 months, non-stop. As time continued to pass, the stress began to tell on the crew. Every evening there were reports of problems among the crew, fights, arguments, bickering, petty misunderstandings, and out-and-out rebellion. There was no single division or section that didn't have these problems. Finally, The most combative individuals were reported to David for disciplinary action. Crewman First Class Jamie Southern, his own yeoman, was involved in several knockdown, drag-out fist fights. David called Commodore Clausen to find out if he had a counselor on station. Clausen said that he did not and that David would have to make do with what he had. He called T. Vass and asked if anyone in her division had any experience in counseling. Dr. M. Tao and I are both trained in psychology. We also have Lieutenant Trank. She is a Hephaestusian and trained as a ship's counselor. He asked T. Vass to join him for dinner in the conference room and told her to ask Dr. M. Tao and Lieutenant Trank are to come as well. He laid out the problem in the conference room as he saw it. Then he asked the three professionals to investigate the situation and recommend appropriate actions that he and the other officers could take. After several days, the doctors and the counselor reported to their captain that it was the stress of the pace of the retrofit. The members of the crew were just simply worn out. They had been working 12-hour days for months without a break. Lieutenant Trank recommended shore leave or a day off, with nothing to do or a party. David thanked them and asked them to continue to monitor the situation and make suitable recommendations. That evening, talking to his officers, David outlined the report that T. Vass and her officers had given him. He outlined the recommendations and asked their opinion. John was the first to speak up.
Sir, I believe we should use all three. First, a party in each division and section, a day off the day after the party, and then a day or two shore leave on the naval base.
The other officers agreed. David asked about the time lost. Would they be able to make it up? Would they complete the work by the commissioning date? Captain O'Reilly replied,
Captain, we have lost a lot of man-hours because of these problems. I think we will gain time if we give the crew a break every now and then.
All right, let's plan our parties for tomorrow evening. We can coordinate them with dinner. At the parties, we can announce the next day off and begin scheduling shore leave. I'll coordinate with the Commodore and let you know what he says. David dismissed the officers but asked John to stay a moment. John, you and the others are all combat veterans in space. I'm just a ground pounder. I have never commanded troops in space. Please keep me straight. Can I rely on you to advise me in these kinds of situations? 6 days later, many of his crewmen were bleary-eyed and suffering hangovers. But every one of them returned to work with renewed energy and dedication. It took 2 weeks to make up the lost man-hours. Finally, however, the officers began to schedule 1 day off a week for each crewman, including the officers. One evening, T. Vass asked David if he would give her a few minutes after the evening briefing. What can I do for you, Doctor?
Captain, the crew is doing exceptionally well. The days off and regular shore leaves have brought the crew's morale up, and listening to the officers' evening reports, everything is ahead of schedule.
That's true. But what else do you want, Doctor?
Captain, there is one member of the crew that has not taken a day off, has not taken shore leave, and he is getting cranky and difficult to deal with.
Doctor? Cranky? Is that your professional diagnosis?
I am just trying to express this crewman's mental state in easy-to-understand terms. Something must be done about this individual before he goes off the deep end.
All right, Doctor. I guess I will have to handle this personally. Who is this crewman?
The crewman is you, Captain. I recommend that you take several days off, go to the naval base, get drunk, or sleep for 2 days.
T. Vass, I can't take the time. This ship must be battle-ready in less than 9 months.
The work is being done on the ship. You just tell Commander Self that you're taking some time off. He can call you if he can't handle a problem. Remember, he was captain of his own ship at one time.
David realized her wisdom and told her he would get some rest. That evening he received a call from Commodore Clausen.
Dave, T. Vass tells me you are to take a couple of days to rest. How about joining me for dinner this evening?
Thank you, sir. I'd be happy to join you. What time?
How about 20-30 hours?
I'll be there, sir. Out. 20-30 hours, and David had just beamed aboard the naval base. Lieutenant J.G. Zappelli met him.
The Commodore's compliments, Captain. If you will follow me, please.
Lead on. They traveled several minutes and stopped before a nondescript door, and she thumbed the annunciator. A very handsome woman opened the door and invited them in. The lieutenant demurred, saying she had a date in a few minutes. David entered a well-decorated apartment, noting the definite hand of a woman around the room. Introducing herself as Mrs. Clausen, she invited him to sit, explaining that her husband would be in soon. After a few minutes, the Commodore entered the room and bid David welcome. Sitting, David discovered a wonderfully aromatic meal. It was obvious that Mrs. Clausen was an excellent cook. She assured David that everything was made from scratch. They engaged in light conversation during the meal when Mrs. Clausen asked David if he had ever been married. David told her that he had.
Captain, where is your wife now?
My wife and family were killed in an automobile accident. Commodore Clausen perked up.
Automobile accident? When did this happen?
August 23, 1985, sir.
1985? Oh, you're that Stevens. Marge, this is one of the System Navy's 500-year-old men. Tell me, Dave, why does the Admiralty have it in for you?
I wish I knew. I have never done anything to any one of them. I don't even know who is against me. Admirals Merivotch and Holoran both seem to support me.
Yes. Well, tell me about how you got here so far in your future.
David told the Clausens about the accident and his decision to take part in Project Deep Silence. As the evening progressed, Mrs. Clausen asked David if he had left anyone behind. He paused a long time. Then he told her about Stella. About the promise to return and marry her. David reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn box. Inside lay the wedding band he had carried for so long. I just can't make myself get rid of it. I can't put it among my belongings in the ship because I would feel like I had betrayed her. Marge asked.
Are you still in love with her?
There is not a day when I am free of the memory of my wife and fiancé. Phyllis was so much a part of me that very little does not remind me of her.
What about Stella?
She had this habit. When I kissed her, she would say, "Oh David, do that again." I hear her voice saying, "Do that again" a dozen times a day. Work is the only thing that gives me any relief from the memories of them.
So that's really why you didn't take any time off?
Yeah. Now I'm under my ship's surgeon's orders to rest. 2 days now, I will be haunted by their memory. Well, thank you for the excellent dinner and company. I'll leave you two for now. Good night.
Good night, Dave. I hope you can get some rest.
Returning to the ship and his cabin, he set the ring on his dresser for a moment, and then he placed it under his pillow. Finally, he fell into bed and slept. In his dreams, Phyllis called to him, and as he drew near her, she became Stella, and she moved away, accusing him of leaving her all alone.
David, I waited, I did. Why didn't you come back to me?
He awoke choking back his tears. No, he would have to go back to work. He had to have a little relief. But it was 0300. He did need his sleep. He would ask T. Bass for something to help him sleep more peacefully. Instead, he spent the rest of the night dreaming, being accused of abandoning his wife and his fiancée. It was about 2300 ship's time, and Lieutenant Trenck, on her way to her quarters, was passing the captain's cabin when a wave of pain hit her like an ion storm. She reeled a moment, straightened, and reached out with her empathic sense to discover the source of the pain. She determined that this wave of pain and loneliness came from the captain's cabin. Shocked, she tapped her comm badge.
Trenck to Dr. Tivas.
A slightly annoyed voice replied.
Tivas here, go ahead.
Lieutenant Trenck returned.
Doctor, I'm outside the captain's cabin and was hit with a wave of extreme emotional pain. It almost knocked me over. I checked. It's coming from the captain's cabin. Please advise.
T. Bass replied.
Stay there if you can. I'm on my way.
Lieutenant Trenck stayed but moved away from the source of the pain. The doctor came around and staggered, having been hit by the extreme pain.
Emily, it's coming from the captain's cabin. But why are you here so far away from his cabin?
Emily replied.
I had to escape the horror.
T. Bass asked.
What can you feel in that wave?
Lieutenant Trenck thought momentarily.
I feel a very profound loneliness, and a feeling of isolation, not just loneliness but extreme isolation. I sense a powerful feeling of self-doubt. He feels, how can I explain it? He feels like a poor actor in a very bad play.
T. Vass stepped over to the door and touched the annunciator.
Captain, Tivas here, open.
There was no reply. Again, she touched the annunciator.
Captain, open.
Again, no response. T-Vas touched her comm badge.
Computer, open the door to the captain's cabin. Priority medical override, TVAS, Alpha 1.
The door to the cabin opened, and the two women saw the captain on the bed, in uniform, asleep, crying. T-Vas touched the captain's shoulder but recoiled from the pain. Then Lieutenant Trenck and T-Vas both shook the captain awake. David looked to his right, then to his left. What? What are you two doing here? He asked, swinging to a sitting posture. T-Vas sat at his right side and said,
Emily, sit there.
Indicating the left side. Both women put their arms around David. Lieutenant Trenck said,
You know T-Vas and I are empaths. I was going to my cabin and was almost bowled over by the pain coming from you. I called Dr. T-Vas and she commanded the computer to open the door. Captain, we can feel your pain. Is there anything we can do?
David shook his head. Send me back to my time. Send me back to Stella. The two women were almost frightened at the intense emotions coming from their captain. T-Vas looked at Emily.
Emily, you're a trained counselor. Show me what to do.
Emily took T-Vas' hand.
Like this.
She mentally showed T-Vas the place in David's mind and began to soothe the pain David was experiencing. Emily and T-Vas worked to soothe the captain's pain.
Doctor, this will provide temporary relief. It would take a powerful telepath to bury this permanently. But you or I can do this when his pain gets too much for him.
T-Vas asked.
How long will this last?
Emily replied.
It's hard to tell. I was taught how to do this, but I've never done it until now.
After a while, Lieutenant Trenck stood.
Captain, you should sleep now. Doctor, let's leave him for now.
And with that, the two ladies left the captain's cabin. In the corridor, T-Vas said,
Perhaps one of us should monitor the captain every day. I'll check him tomorrow morning if you check the next day.
That agreement made Lieutenant Trenck and Lieutenant Commander T-Vas went to their cabins. As they turned to leave, Lieutenant Trenck said,
Doctor, you are in love with our captain, aren't you?
T-Vas answered.
No, Emily, I am not.
Emily smiled.
T-Vas, you forget, I was inside your head. You are in love with the captain. Does he know?
T-Vas replied.
No. He doesn't know.
Emily told the doctor.
Tell him. If you don't, I will.
T-Vas started to cry.
Emily, please don't tell him. Please. I beg you, don't tell him.
T-Vas, don't you want to be happy? Our captain is an extraordinary man, you need to tell him.
Oh, Emily, I can't. It's too embarrassing. Please. Don't tell him.
Emily sighed.
I'll not tell anyone, but you're going to regret this decision.
Then they continued on to their cabins. In her cabin, T-Vas cried herself to sleep. The work went well. The time flew by, and soon it was only a month before the christening date. During the regular evening briefing, David met with his division and section chiefs in the conference room. John told the group,
The ship is ready as far as I can see. Captain O'Reilly, what about the engines?
My children are ready. With the integrity field now tied into the new shield generator system, the ship will be able to withstand greater acceleration and greater speeds.
David asked, O'Reilly, how fast do you think we can go?
ICUL, ultralight, 12 as a very approachable speed. Could be the high-end cruising speed. Can't say until we've tested the system in open space.
But there is a possibility we can move faster than any ship in the fleet today?
Aye, sir.
With the improved shields, we would be close to invulnerable.
Aye.
Well, O'Reilly, any other good news for us?
Aye, since the new computer system has been installed and programmed like the Enterprise, I'd say we will be able to maneuver faster than before. We have all the strengths of the old and new ships and few weaknesses.
John went on.
Security, your report.
Each section, in turn, reported ready. At last, John turned to David and said,
Captain, I believe we are ready for our pre-christening trials.
All right. Let's schedule our trials beginning tomorrow at 0800 hours. Alert your personnel. Full first shift on duty by 0730. Those gathered in the conference room beamed their approval.
Aye, aye, sir. 0730.
David was so excited by the prospects of the space trials that it was impossible to sleep. So he wandered the corridors of his ship for several hours and decided to see if he could get a sleep aid from sick bay. T-Vass was in sick bay when he got there. "Doctor, I didn't expect to see you here on duty this time of night."
I am a little stimulated about our trails tomorrow, so I thought I might catch up on some work.
Stimulated? Are you excited about it, Doctor?
I'm Hephaestus, Captain. Of course, we don't get excited. But we can look forward to an event with some anticipation.
Ha, my Hephaestus friend, you just won't admit that you are a little excited about something we have all worked so hard for a year and a half.
Please, Captain. Remember, we do have emotions, we just control them.
T-Vass, have you got something to help me sleep? I've got to be sharp tomorrow morning. The doctor gave David a small capsule. This will help you relax. Maybe with that, you can sleep. David slept until 0600, woke, showered, and had a quick breakfast. On the bridge at 0730, the first shift took their places and began the pre-launch countdown. At 0745, David called Naval Base. "Naval Base, this is the Constitution. We are preparing to begin our space trials." Commodore Clausen's voice replied,
"Roger, Constitution. Calm seas and fair winds."
"All right, John, let's take her out. Helm, ahead dead slow, maneuvering thrusters only."
"Ahead dead slow. Maneuvering thrusters only, aye sir."
The gallant old ship began to slide forward. As they gained a little speed, the helm maneuvered around the other ships and debris into open space. Finally, Lieutenant Abels obtained clearance to begin the trials. Helm, 360 Mark 180. UL-1. 360 Mark 180, UL-1, aye. Abels, ship wide, please.
Ship wide, sir.
Now hear this. This is the captain. We are about to begin our space trials. Stay alert. Calm seas and fair winds. Captain out. Helm, execute. The venerable old ship suddenly sprang to life and shot forward UL-1. Status. Each station of the bridge answered, "Normal, sir." "O'Reilly, how are things down there?"
"My children are doing quite nicely, Captain."
After about 15 minutes, David ordered, UL-2. 6 hours later, the Constitution was doing UL-12. "O'Reilly, we are at UL-12. How are your children doing?"
"Captain, running cool and normal. I couldn't be happier with them. All systems normal."
"John, take the con, and let's do a little maneuvering at this speed."
"Aye aye sir."
John took the center chair and began to put the ship through her paces. At the end of 8 hours, David ordered shift change. Onto the bridge came Commander Slater and her bridge crew. Each took their place in a professional manner, everyone grinning like a Cheshire cat. John stood, and he and Slater looked at the captain. But David told Beverly to take the con. "Take us back to Naval Base, Beverly. Ah, keep her around UL-6 or below. I want all 3 ships to have a chance at running her. Then, when you have a good target, I want to test our laser banks. Okay?"
Aye, aye, sir.
She was smiling a very wide smile, as was her whole crew. It was not long before the ship happened upon an asteroid to use as a target.
Ready lasers.
Beverly tapped her comm badge.
Weapons room, on your toes.
Weapons, aye sir.
Take your aim and fire.
There was the familiar whine as the weapons discharged and the asteroid disappeared.
Great shot, okay, let's watch for another target.
It was obvious to David that Beverly was in her element. He told Beverly that he would be in his cabin if there were going to be anything interesting happening to call him.
Aye, sir.
And she returned to the business of commanding the ship and watching for another target. David was satisfied with the trials so far. They had tested every system and subsystem in the ship under natural conditions. He was confident that his crew was equally well tested. Again, the whine of the lasers. Having set his alarm for shift change, he quietly drifted off. After 3 days of space trials and they returned to Naval Base 13. David completed his report and personally carried it to Commodore Clausen. He glanced at the report, turned to the last page, read a few lines, and then said,
"She's your ship. What do you think?"
"Sir, She handles like a dream and looks like she just came out of the San Francisco shipyards. I'm proud to be her captain.
Admirals Merivotch and Holoran will be here tomorrow. You will have a dress review at 1900 in your shuttle bay. Then at 2000, there will be a reception in your rec room. All senior officers will be in attendance. The day after, at 1300, your ship will be christened. Admiral Merivotch is bringing his wife, and she will launch the champagne. She is a very nice woman, but a little ditzy at times. You'll like her.
Everything went off without a hitch. The parade review, the reception, and the christening. After everything had quieted down, David, John, O'Reilly, and Beverly found themselves sitting at a table in the rec room with Admiral Holoran.
David, I'm going to ask a favor.
Anything, Admiral.
I would like to come along with you on your first mission.
Sir, you don't have to ask.
Yes, I do. It's your ship. But I don't want you to be uncomfortable with me on board.
Admiral, it would be an honor to have you. John, let's ready the VIP suite.
Aye, aye, sir.
The ship was ready, the crew was ready, all they needed now was mission orders. Commodore Clausen called over.
Dave, I've got your orders. I'll transmit them over to your communications officer. But in a nutshell, you have been given an exploratory and mapping mission toward the Galactic Center. You are to leave within the hour.
Aye, aye, sir. Thanks for your hospitality. Constitution out.
Constitution, calm seas, and fair winds.
Calm seas.